apologize for the slight interruption. Technology once again letting us down. But it's now time to go across to look at the appointment made by the president of the country, President Cyril Ramaphosa, appointing members of the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. And the council obviously will provide advisory input on matters related to the government's response to recommendations and also looking at issues surrounding corruption. Now, this is a new body that has been created and headed by none other than a colleague of mine, an old school friend. And once again, it's been an absolute pleasure linking up with Professor Firoz Cachalia, who is the chairperson of the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. Firoz, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jumma Mubarak. Wonderful you're able to join us this morning.
Wa alaikum salam, Nayat. And as you alluded to our history together in Willie Mills High School, very fond memories of our time together, and of course other students from Germiston. I don't know if your listeners are aware that you are always one of the brightest boys in class.
Well, Jazakallah for that, Firoz, and obviously very modest, and obviously, just looking at yourself and what you've achieved, alhamdulillah, over the years, and it certainly makes us proud, that we were associated together in those years, many, many years ago. But Firoz, also to congratulate you on the appointment, and particularly as the chairperson, and just looking at some of the background to the formation of this advisory council and your appointment in particular, Firoz.
Yes, so in that I was informed last week. Actually, the media found out earlier, so I didn't really have a communication from the presidency until after the announcement. And of course, I feel honored, to have this responsibility. I also feel quite daunted because it's there's no doubt that fighting corruption has to be a priority for our country. In order, I think, to restore trust in our democratic institutions, the South African public quite rightly are demanding a corruption-free society. I don't think that is an unrealistic ambition. We have to defeat the scourge. You will remember, Nayat, in those days when we were fighting apartheid, and those who were collaborating with apartheid, one of the issues that fired up the concerns of our people was the issue of corruption. And I mean, to find ourselves in a situation today where people who are elected into public office have the honor and responsibility of serving our people, serve their own interests instead is quite shameful. And so, this step by the president is a small step. This body is only an advisory body, but it's sort of positioned between society, if you like, because it has to communicate with civil society, mobilize civil society. So it's kind of positioned between society, which and the presidency, which is at the heart of political power in the country, and so it has potential to make a difference. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Well, there certainly is a lot of work, Firoz, and also looking at two critical issues. One is to look at the progress as far as the implementation of the anti-corruption strategy goes, but also at the same time furthering the anti-corruption agenda. And for me, this is extremely important, considering that where we are at this point in time, and we've been through a lot. We've been through things like state capture. We've been through the entire Zondo Commission on state capture, the corruption issues that came out, and also many other issues. And one of the critical questions would be that, looking at the powers of the council as in an advisory capacity, but also as far as recommending to the president, there are issues surrounding the NPA, the Zondo Commission recommendations. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work ahead for you and the committee, Firoz.
Quite right. So you've already mentioned our advisory responsibilities. The advice that we are required to provide based on research and so forth, careful research, is is confidential. So it's the advice, as far as I understand how the process will work, will be confidential. But we do have a monitoring a responsibility to monitor the implementation of the strategy, and that gives us some scope to perhaps engage with the public, as distinct from providing confidential advice to the president. Perhaps I should clarify that at this point, it's not clear what our responsibilities are in relation to the criminal justice cluster. That is, those institutions which are responsible for investigating and prosecuting criminal corruption. And clearly, one of the main concerns of the public, quite rightly, is that those institutions have to be capacitated to bring those who have engaged in criminal corruption to book. But I also want to point out that fighting corruption is not limited to the emphasis on arrest and prosecution and so forth, because there are forms of corruption which are as damaging, which are not criminally indictable. I mean, I'll take a simple example. You may be seeking to influence the government decision making by showering politicians and administrators with gifts in order to influence policy making or to obtain some benefit. That kind of conduct is also morally impeachable, but may not be criminal. So we've got to take a broader view of the measures that are required to fight corruption. Another example would be, I think, a very important piece of legislation was recently adopted to require transparency in the funds that are donated to political parties. Not only to provide transparency, but to place some kind of cap on the amounts that can be provided. I think that was an extremely important initiative because it's aimed at ensuring that people do not fund political parties in order to gain some improper influence over decision making. And the reason for that is that we want to ensure that the government serves the public interest and not special interest. So the scope of the work that the council must do spans the entire field of anti-corruption measures. Perhaps another example, just to reinforce this point, many of your listeners will remember some time ago the scandal around members of parliament abusing their travel privileges. their conduct was not um, criminally indictable, but was certainly unethical and immoral. And so there's no doubt in my mind that we need to be thinking about strengthening the system that requires accountability and that establishes ethical standards for behavior in public office. Nepotism is also an example. I mean, when people in public office use their positions to prefer their family, their friends, the booty system that we are all very familiar with. Now, those are all forms of corruption, but they're not necessary. They don't always give rise to criminal prosecutions and so forth. So I take a fairly broad view of what is political corruption, how we should define political corruption. There is also the matter, I think perhaps we can distinguish between political corruption and petty corruption. Part of our problem concerns the corrupt behavior of people in high office, people in senior positions, who are able then to extract rents from the public, and who are also, unfortunately, in a position often to protect themselves because they're in positions of power. And to some extent, we're now seeing that in the reaction to the recommendations of the Zondo Commission. The Zondo Commission has done some excellent work for the country and for our future. It's within our mandate of this council to examine those recommendations and to advise the president on their implementation. But what is clear from the reaction to the Zondo Commission is that that there are many people who we can point fingers at because there's evidence against them, but who are in a position to protect themselves. So that's the big challenge that we face in the country, dealing with corruption in high office.
Yes, Firoz. And look here, I know it's early days, so it's actually difficult to get into a lot more detail. But just, broadly speaking, you've highlighted and unpacked some of the issues. And I'm sure you've got a more than capable team to actually work with. And just your thoughts on the team that has been selected, Firoz.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong team, people with real expertise and a history of fighting corruption. I happen to know many of them personally. That's just a kind of coincidence. I mean, for instance, I do serve on the board of Corruption Watch. Two of the members, Dave Lewis and Kavisha, have played very important roles. Dave Lewis was a former CEO. Kavisha has done some excellent work on law enforcement, and both of them have been involved in anti-corruption work for a long time. Tandeka Kubule, I know for a long time. Barbara Shiner. So I think the team is going to gel. And from the first meeting that we had, I had the impression that the presidency will provide strong administrative support. We've met with the secretariat and some of the senior people in the presidency who are mandated to support the work of this commission. And I would say, as an initial matter, that it would appear to me that the presidency, is showing the seriousness that is going to be required to support the work of the council. I should also mention, just so that there aren't unrealistic expectations. That I think this is a small and important step, but it's not a panacea. It's not going to there's going. I don't think you'll see kind of immediate results in the sense that there's a reduction of corruption. It's in some ways an interim body. There's a conversation we need to have in the council and advise the president on. There's some proposals about establishing a permanent anti-corruption body, which is kind of independent of the executive branch. So we're going to have to look at that proposal carefully and make specific proposals to the presidency. I think another area of prioritization is whistleblower protection. We've seen from recent events that the bravest people, the most courageous and honorable people in public life, who are not willing to play ball, who take a stand, who blow the whistle, are vulnerable. And so that we were dealing with people who don't have moral restraint. If you are prepared to steal from the public purse and kill people who are honorable people in public life who are taking a stand, we've got a serious problem. So I think whistleblower protection is something that needs immediate attention. So I suppose, in brief, I think in summary that it's a strong team. It's receiving the indications are that it will receive strong support from the presidency. It has a lot of work to do, and I think specifically with respect to establishing some kind of permanent anti-corruption body that we still need to design. And I would say that the most critical factor, two factors that are essential in the fight against corruption if it's to be successful, is one is leadership, presidential leadership. And I do think that the president is demonstrating the commitments of the presidency to taking forward the anti-corruption agenda. And the second, I have to really emphasize, it may seem like a soft issue, but this comparative experience in other countries shows that the critical success factor is the public attitude. What we require is public activism. What we require is for our public to say emphatically no to corruption. And it has to be an issue in any election, because that's one way in which the public also demonstrates its views. And, politicians, people who are elected into public office, have to respond to public opinion. So the media also plays a vitally important role. That's why I'm so happy to, among other reasons, to do these interviews. If the South African public stands up and says no to corruption, it will play the most essential role in the long-term fight to achieve a corruption-free society.
Well, certainly looking forward to the work that you are going to be doing, Firoz. And I know, knowing you, and I'm sure you and your team will yield excellent results, inshallah. But for now, we're going to have to leave it at that. And once again, I thank you for coming on, for obviously talking to us, but also at the same time wishing you well, wishing your team well, and achieve what you are going to be setting out to achieve. And at the end of the day, the support that you will have from the vast majority of South Africans. We know most of South Africans are honest, law-abiding. We want our country to succeed. And inshallah, we wish you well. And please take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Much appreciated, man. Thank you.
Professor Firoz Cachalia with us this morning, and this comes against the the appointment by the president of members of the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. I know we are running pretty late, but sadly we've had some technical issues that were that would be in fact completely, I would say, out of our control. We still got Abba Mariam Mia standing by.